Hello, and welcome to another episode of Disrupt Your Now, the show for entrepreneurs who are ready to shake things up. And my guest tonight is my good buddy Marlana Semenza. Marlena's in the book, y'all. The last book, Disrupt Your Now.
I
She's
am,
in
I
that.
am.
Yes, you are. She's in that book, and everybody thinks, oh, she's a photographer. Yes, she takes photographs. She is a photographer, but that's like a micro part of what she does. So, Marlena, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and give them your background, how you got to where you are, and then we're going to talk about how we can explain ourselves to people so they know who we are and what we do.
Okay. My name is Marlena, and I got a degree in photography.
Uh-huh.
So we actually do exist, people that went to school for it. Um, and my first job out of college was with the World Wrestling Federation. I climbed on a tour bus about 6 months before I graduated, and they held the job for me while I went back and finished my last semester.
Mhm.
And I did that for 3 years. And then you fast forward again, I had a minor in illustration. So I worked for a cartooning and animation company.
Mhm.
And then you fast forward again, and I worked for doing set styling and design, interior design, advertising for Ethan Allen and This Old House and Women's
Mhm.
Day and places like that. Um, and the only reason I mention all of those things is because what I do now is because photography was always in the mix.
Mhm.
So I use all those things and I pull it all together and I use it to help people steer their reputation. And I do that through images, but it encompasses all of that. It encompasses storytelling and locations and things like that.
Yeah.
And so, in a nutshell, that's what I do.
And I just love what you do though, because people think about they're like, oh, I need some pictures. I need a few photos. And they're like, oh, whoever has an iPhone or if you have a selfie stick, and they don't think about, and I'm guilty of this too, they don't think about how much we communicate through a photograph.
Yeah.
And even if they do get a good photographer, it's pretty much bring the clothes you want to wear and come to this place. And then they just take the same shots that everybody else does. And I know that you work with people to really tell the story through their
Yeah.
photography.
Well, I think unfortunately we forget that because most people post on social media,
Yeah.
right? Um, and we forget that social media is social.
Mhm.
And it's also a means of communication. So most people, when they follow us on social media, they have either never met us in person or may never meet us in person.
Mhm.
So what are we communicating to them?
Yeah.
And that's part of the idea and the strategy behind what I do because it, it is a conversation. So
Mhm.
it's knowing who we're speaking to because depending on who's on the other side that you're trying to reach, the conversation can take a different turn or it can there can be different things that are important.
Right. Yeah, and like you said, we forget about things. We are so close to our own stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what I do with strategy is help people get out of their own way so that I can help them figure out what it is they really, really want to be doing. And you do similarly, but you help them figure out and express what it is they actually do.
Right,
And I
right.
love it because you can just I've seen you in action, so I see how you just cut to the chase. You're able to just see through all the fog and cut down to the chase, and I love that.
Well, thank you. And I it's fun for me because most of the time it's also a trust exercise
Yeah.
because I know not everybody's comfortable in front of a camera, whether it be still camera, video camera, whatever. So it's building that trust and building that rapport and knowing that, you know what, no matter what, I've got you. I will not
Yeah.
let you look bad. I will not let you do anything crazy. I will not let you, be portrayed in any way that isn't good for you.
Mhm.
And also there's another element of trust because a lot of people, especially a lot of photographers when they're first starting out, when they photograph somebody, they will immediately go and take those images and post them and, "Oh, look what I did," and all that.
Yeah.
And I don't take that approach
Mhm.
because even though from a legal standpoint, those images are mine, but
Yeah.
from an ethical standpoint to me, they are yours long before they are mine.
Mhm.
So it's up to you to use them first. It is up to you to decide whether or not I show them at all and how I
Mhm.
show them. So there's a
That's
lot of trust
great.
involved.
Well, and that's something that I think most people don't even know about photography. They don't understand the copyright stuff or any of that. So that gets over in another subject. But for those of y'all who are listening, those are the kind of things that you need to be able to talk with your photographer when you talk about it. But just call Marlena because she already knows it. But what I was going to also say earlier when you talked about social media and communicating with people, and our messaging on social media is so important because, and I don't mean like here's your messaging and follow this script, but it's like the vocabulary you use, the way you dress, your expressions and everything are speaking to different target audiences. So if you're speaking in one way, but your target market really doesn't connect with that, there goes my dang internet again. I'm so sorry, y'all. I'm not going to say who the company is, but this has been happening for about a month now, and I'm ready to go on the warpath. Um, so you can be saying something and it's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But the people that you really want to reach are over here,
Right.
and they either don't know what you're talking about because you're the pro and they're not, so they don't speak the language, or you may even offend them by
Right.
something that you say.
Right. And I think that's the other thing too. As entrepreneurs, we can be very guilty of no matter what industry we're in. It's not narrowing down. It's not niching down to speak to one person.
Yeah.
And because we always think that, oh, well, then I'm leaving money on the table, or if I don't, but I can do this for everyone.
Hmm.
And maybe you can. But my friend Danny will say that he won't do business with anybody that doesn't pass the chug test for him.
Uh-huh.
And there's another woman, Kate, who will also say, don't work with anybody that you wouldn't have to your home for dinner.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of that. Like my camera does not care who's on the other side. I do.
Mhm. Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
because like I said, this is a relationship,
Mhm.
and I want to be in this relationship with people that, yeah, I will get along with. And I'm not for everybody either.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And
Well, and
I'm
you get along with them, but you also have fun with them, and that's, because I know some of your clients, and they're, like, totally different. Some people like, "Only do weddings, only do babies," whatever, and you're like, "No, it might seem like you're all over the place, but you're not because
right,
you're helping communicate a personal brand,
right,
but you work with different types of people because you're drawn to them and they're drawn to you,
right,
and you just click with each other."
right. One thing I would say that is generally a common denominator in most of my clientele is these are people that, for the most part, would probably have an agent at some point.
Yeah, okay,
They may not immediately, but at some point they probably will.
okay. One other thing I was gonna say before we get in deeper, earlier you said about people feeling self-conscious and not having photographs taken, and as a woman, I can say this, we women are we're like, "I gotta lose 5 more pounds," or "I gotta wait till the summer when I have a tan," or something like that, and I know it's hard to force yourself to step out there.
But, here's the thing too. Once again, it goes back to the trust factor.
Mhm.
And I spent, oh, I don't know, probably, most of my 20s and 30s equally in front of the camera and behind it.
Yeah.
And so you learn things on both sides of
Mhm.
how to pose people, how they should look, how they want to look. And there are tricks like for women, anything that you push toward camera gets bigger. Anything that you push away from camera gets smaller. So
Mhm.
everybody that is putting their hand on their hip and kicking it toward camera, you're not doing yourself any favors if you're trying to look smaller.
Mhm.
So it's just knowing these little things along the way and
Yeah.
kind of tweaking people into a better position.
Oh, okay. Well, okay, y'all, we all have to remember that, whatever we put towards the camera. So, I know that when you start working with somebody or before you even start working with them, you actually have a long questionnaire
Yeah.
before you and I've seen you talk with potential clients, and I know that even after the questionnaire, sometimes you don't work with people because you realize that y'all are just not right for each other.
Right.
But explain to the people in the audience the kind of things that you ask and why they are so important. Because I think the average entrepreneur really just does not get why personal brand is so important. And y'all, we're not talking about a logo. We are talking about your reputation and how people perceive you.
Yeah. And maybe it would also be beneficial to just let people know what personal brand photography is. The best way that I can explain it is it's not a headshot. So a headshot, while necessary, is kind of like a book title. It gives you an introduction, but that's about all that it does. But the reason that we buy the book is always for the story. And that's what personal brand photography does. It tells a story, tells your
Mhm.
story. And so this questionnaire that I send out to people, it's things like, um, what's the gap between how you're seen now and how you want to be seen?
Mhm.
Um, is who are we speaking to? What problem do you solve for them? What happens if that problem is not solved? What
Mhm.
happens if that problem is solved? So it's all of these kinds of things, and then it all gets lumped into figuring out how to craft the image.
Yeah, and I know there I go again.
That's okay. You're back.
You know what? If this keeps happening, I'm gonna have to say the company, but I'm not going to yet. Um, so I've been in meetings with you, and I know you also ask things like, "What are your goals? Where do you want to be in a year, 3 years, and 5 years?" And to the audience, that's the same kind of things I ask when I'm talking about big picture strategy. So all of this stuff is interconnected.
Yeah,
Your personal brand, your visual brand, your messaging, your story is all part of your overall strategy. And when things don't align, there's no way that you can reach your goal.
right. And that's what I love about watching what you do too, because you people basically hand you this balloon and you blow it up into this thing that they didn't even imagine was possible. And then not just that, you take that balloon and you start to make little balloon animals out of it. And even with that, there's a lot that goes into that because the balloon can't be too big to make
Mhm.
this, it can't be too small to make that. So there's a lot that you do and a lot that goes into what you do. And then I just take that and I breathe life into that animal.
But by you asking those questions, also, you help your clients uncover their story
Yeah.
because we are so close to our own selves. We can't take that step back. And we're so lost in the details and the minutia
Right.
that we don't see the big picture that other people see. So it's like looking at pieces of a jigsaw puzzle.
Right.
You can look at each individual piece, but if you take a step back, or those books, Magic Eye, where if you look at them and then you let your eyes blur and you see something different.
Mhm.
My kids used to love those. I did too. So you're able to see things differently than the person who is actually the client.
And and I can say this too because I know you can relate to this statement. It's a busy world in my head.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that I usually ask people is, what's a fun fact about you? Because
Mhm.
usually that is something that they would have disregarded.
I know. If you were to ask me that, I'd be like, "I don't know." Because then we start overthinking about it. But I guarantee you friends would be able to go, "Oh, this or that or whatever." But I would be like, "I don't know."
Yeah, because I asked that to a gentleman once and he said, "Well, I was a sport fisherman."
Uh-huh.
And he said, "But, people have said to me that I should probably take that off my resume." Meanwhile, what he was doing was helping businesses restructure and get out of bankruptcy and all those kinds of things. I said, "Not only do you not take that off your resume," I said, "let's lean into that story because
Uh-huh.
just like fishing, you have to know where the fish are, what bait to use, when to throw them back, all these kinds of things. I said, how is that really any different than business? So let's just connect them.
So true. And who else would think of that? Speaking of so busy in your head, I have these napkins that I actually used the other night, and it says something to the effect of, "You're just jealous because the voices are only speaking to me or aren't speaking to you," or whatever. I love stuff like that. But yes, our minds are very busy, little
Hmm.
things running around in them all the time. So, what do you see as the biggest mistake for somebody who would be your perfect client? What are the biggest mistakes that you see that they have made before they come to you?
Um, Thinking that they don't need to be showing up.
Hmm.
Um, even for me, I show the work that I do, but the images that I post of me always get the most interaction.
Uh huh.
And I think that's one
Interesting.
thing that we all need to realize is that we need to be present in it's our brand. It's our story,
Hmm.
so we need to be present. And the other thing too I would say is not, and I don't mean this, yes, I am a photographer and this is not a pitch in any way, but it's also not investing in professional images
Yeah.
because especially once you reach a certain level, if you want to be looked at as a professional, but you're not investing in you,
Hmm.
then why would I invest in you?
True. And there's nothing wrong with having some of the
Oh,
your own
absolutely.
photography,
Absolutely.
but there's so many people that it's so obvious that it's selfie because they're not even looking. You can see their eyes looking at the camera
Mhm.
instead of far off or whatever, or
Right.
but looking not at the right place on the camera. It's so obvious most of the time when people do take selfies. And it's okay sometimes, most of the time, but for certain places, it really is distracting.
Yeah. And, I am a big believer that you can absolutely supplement your social media feeds with your own images.
Mhm.
The ones that you're taking yourself, absolutely,
Yeah,
because
and
it
you
doesn't have to be
should.
a perfect
Yeah,
thing. No, not at
right,
all.
and you
Right.
should, but for the focus of your media kit or whatever,
Right.
have these more professional images.
Right.
Well, I want you to I'll set the stage for how we first met while you're in the book, and then because this will give people an idea of how you think, and then we'll get back into stuff about other people. But so right after COVID, y'all, I saw a friend of mine, Henry Sims, posted a photograph from a photography session of him on his motorcycle on the beach out in LA. I was like, "Oh, that's a really good picture." I'm thinking to myself. And then he's like, "Yes." And Marlena took it, and she was in Raleigh, North Carolina, which she took it. I'm like, "What?" And I was like, "I gotta meet this girl." And so that's how Marlena ended up in what I think you've been on the show before a
Mhm.
couple years ago, but you're also in the book. But y'all, I thought it was so fascinating because when COVID hit, you would think, okay, photographers are out of business because how are they going to be with clients to take photography? Well, Marlena figured out, she's like, oh, I'll just go around it, figure out a different way to reach my goal. And she figured out a way to do virtual photography. So she created a service called Photographer in Your Pocket. Tell them about that.
Well, what happened was I have a good friend, Claire, and she also is a brand photographer in the DC area. And Claire saw people doing FaceTime photos.
Hmm.
And she's like, well, let's try these out. So we tried them out on each other. And most photographers that were doing them, and there weren't many, but most photographers that were doing them for fun because we create. That's what we do. And
Hmm.
being thrown into captivity, we were all losing our minds.
Hmm.
So as we started doing them, I thought, this is a business model. And so I found an app because the only downside with FaceTime is that it only works with Apple devices.
Hmm.
So I found an app that I can work with people on Android or Apple, and it doesn't take the place of in-person images because of the size and things like that, but
Yeah.
it certainly is a step way above a selfie. And so I actually just did a session a couple of weeks ago for a woman in Greece.
That is so cool.
Yeah, and it's great because I've photographed people in Mexico and New Jersey and California, and I've never met these people.
And I think it's so cool because I imagine that some people would feel more comfortable getting started that way because they're in their own surroundings
Right.
and everything, and they're not having to go somewhere and
Hmm.
physically be with you. And you have those packages, right? Like a subscription
I
that
do.
people can get X
Hmm.
number of new photos every month. And so I'm gonna tell the audience this. I thought it was really cool. This shows how much Marlena accommodates her clients. She had a friend who was it Vermont in the fall, was in Vermont or somewhere in the fall, and the leaves were so beautiful. And she contacted her. She goes, I know you probably don't have time, blah, blah, blah. But is there any way you can do a few photographs? And she did. Now, of course, y'all can't have her do that all the time because she has her own life. But if it does work out for her, and think about it, that might be the only time those people go there. And now
Right.
she's got some really good photos
Right.
for her own portfolio
And
that she
also too,
never
if
would
you
have had.
travel, let's say you're an entrepreneur or you're a speaker,
Yeah.
and you travel,
Mhm.
and let's say you're, I don't know, in the Canary Islands, and you think, oh gosh, I would love photos of this for my social media and things like that, but I don't have a photographer. Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
Yes, because you have Marlena in your pocket.
Hmm.
I think it's awesome. So the person you did from Greece, or I know most of the people that do the virtual photography for you, you probably haven't met in person. So they find you on social media.
Yeah. And this woman was actually a guest on my show at one point, and we just started talking afterwards. And she said, "Oh, I wish I lived in the United States. I'd love to work with you." I said, we can do that." Of
That's
course, when
great.
I
And
saw Greece, I'm thinking, no, I need to go there.
yeah, yeah, you do. Yeah, and that is also that service is a great example of pivoting for changes in the marketplace, but it's also a great example of an introductory level service.
Right.
So that if somebody isn't ready to make that full commitment and work with you, on a bigger scale, it's a way that they can dip their toe in
Right.
and learn more about you and experience it and enjoy using the photographs. And then if y'all really click, they may go in and work with you in person.
Right. Yeah.
So
I'm
can you
trying to.
tell?
I'm trying to
Oh,
either
sorry.
get her here or go there.
I know. I think you need to go to Greece. I really do think you. I've never been there though. It
Me
looks
neither.
beautiful.
But oh, let
Yeah.
me tell you, it was gorgeous.
Ugh, there I go again, y'all. I'm sorry. Am I back for you?
You are. You are.
I'm so sick of this.
The good
Um,
news is that it froze on your smiling face.
oh, good. It didn't freeze on me rolling my eyes and cursing.
No.
Good. So can you share with them any of your clients or any fun stories about things that you've gone through with your clients or that your clients have gone through that people out there might kind of connect with?
Well, you were talking earlier about that I have very different clients sometimes. And so the most interesting week I ever had, I started off the week with l- literally a girl in a ball gown and high heels in downtown Raleigh. And I finished the week with a guy naked in the woods.
And I know who that is.
Yes, you do.
That is too funny, Marlena. And I know you're not a woodsy type girl,
I'm really
so
not.
yeah.
I'm really not. I just bought a pair of hiking boots for this particular client.
Mhm. Yeah, you made that investment in him
Yeah.
so that you can go out there and take those photos like you need to.
But it's a whole thing because um about a month or so ago, I actually got a chance to work at this amazing location in Raleigh. There's a old hospital. It's in ruins. It was, I think, the first Black teaching hospital or something like
Oh.
that. And the ruins are absolutely stunning.
Mhm.
But Miss North Carolina, who I was photographing there, and I walked in and I was convinced I was going to see some slithering critter.
Oh, I
And
was
so
gonna say I thought you were gonna say you were convinced you were gonna see, like, a paranormal.
no, the slithering critter is worse. So And so we go walking in there, and I'm yelling the whole time, "Snakes! Snakes, go away, snakes!" So anytime I go out with Wes, who's the naked in the woods guy,
Uh-huh.
um, he can be my snake patrol.
Yeah, that's right. He'll chase him down. So, y'all, that's Wes Harper from Naked and Afraid, and he's been on the show, what, 4 times now? Or
I don't
5?
know.
I can't keep up
Oh,
with it.
3 or 4, 3 or 4,
Yeah, I can't
4 or
keep up
5,
with
I don't
it,
know.
but he's a hoot, though. He's a great guy. So, I want you to tell us, I know when you were first getting started, you were working with wrestling,
Mhm.
as people used to would have said in Virginia and North Carolina back when I was growing up, and maybe they still do. Tell us some of the things that you learned from that. It has to have been like crazy getting good photographs in that kind of environment.
Well, most of what I did at that time, I would set up still photo backstage. I worked for the director of photography,
Mhm.
and so my I was it was very rare that I was ringside. Only a couple of times I did appearance work with
Mhm.
them, but I was there during the golden era, in my opinion,
Yeah.
um, with Roddy Piper and, um, Randy Savage and, all those guys,
Mhm.
and the Legion of Doom, I who I adored.
Uh,
I'm still really close friends with, Joe Laurinaitis' wife, Kim, and Joe
okay.
was Road Warrior Animal,
Oh, funny.
and these guys were amazing athletes, they were amazing showmen,
Mhm.
and to watch them create these personas, I learned a lot from that, about
Yeah, I bet.
creating personas and what went into that, and also
Mhm.
too, to watch how they would leave, like, everything out in the ring,
Mhm.
because that's what people who are paying deserved to see,
Yeah.
and I think that no matter what business you are in, no matter what you do for a living, when people pay you to do something,
Mhm.
that's the one thing I learned, you leave it all in the ring.
Yeah. That's a great lesson to learn.
Mhm.
So, and what a way to start your career out. I
Yeah,
mean, what a crazy ride that was, huh?
it was, literally. Crazy ride. Yeah.
And then some of the other things that you've done, haven't you done work with Martha Stewart Living, her
No,
magazine?
I didn't do work with Martha Stewart. She was out of Connecticut, though.
Okay.
Um, I did do work with This Old House,
Mm,
Woman's Day, Inspired House,
mhm.
a lot of work with Ethan Allen, their New York Times ads and their style
Okay.
books and their training videos for their designers and things like that. So it's been
Yeah.
been
So
a
you
diverse
learned a
ride.
lot about location and
Mhm,
sets and all that kind of stuff.
mhm. And also too, I worked as a designer for them, so
Oh, okay.
and a stylist.
Yeah.
So I can
All
put a
right.
set together.
That's cool. So let's talk some more about the entrepreneurs out there. If somebody out there is like, they're not ready to take the step to work with you, but they really want to work on their own image, their own persona, their own story, what go through some tips or some suggestions that they might be able to apply themselves to at least get their thoughts in order, if and maybe start working on some things before they come to you.
I think the biggest thing is understand the problem you solve and who you solve it for,
Yeah.
and then speak to that person. You don't have to speak to the many, speak to the one, and
Mhm.
you'll reach more than one, but speak to the one. Um, so try and really get into the head of who that person is and what they need to know and how you can be of service to them, because you should always have a serve, don't sell mentality,
Mhm.
because people can Google information for free 99 all day long.
Yeah.
So be the source of that information that will help them.
Well, and that, you know, I'm going to throw something in about web development and stuff because that's one of the things over my career. I've done, people always like, I want to be on the first page of Google. And I'm like, well, the number one way to get to top of search engine results is to continually create new content on your website, write articles, thought leadership, blah, 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 videos. And they're like, no, I don't want to do that. Sorry, there's no white hat SEO search engine optimization person out there who can get you to the first page of Google and keep you there
Yeah.
without you putting the effort in yourself. So that goes back to you don't have a magic wand.
Right.
You can't solve all of their problems,
Right.
but you can help them take that step back and get their thoughts in order
Mhm.
in a way that they can help them
Right.
figure it out.
And actually, Claire and I just started doing, we're kind of testing it out a little bit at the moment, but we started doing consultation for people
Mhm.
where we will tell you kind of what your stories should be, the images that you will need, where your gaps are in your images. We will give you some kind of content strategy. So
Mhm.
all you have to do each week is go back into, oh, Monday I could post something like this. Tuesday I could do this, and it'll just give you something to get kick started with all of that.
That's a great idea because most people do. I mean, I myself included, it's hard to, you just feel like, what am I going to do? I mean, here I have 3 books and I'm still like, what am I going to post about?
We're the worst, you
I
know.
know we
We're
are.
whatever somebody does. Usually, they're the worst ones to implement themselves.
Exactly. It's so much easier to help other people, but that's for the same reason that we spoke about earlier, y'all. It's because we are so close to ourselves, we don't see what the people outside of us see.
Yeah,
So do you and Claire already have that service available, or are you working on it now?
we do, and I will make sure that there is a link
Okay.
on my website to it.
Okay.
Or
Yeah, and you can send it to me also, and I'll add it in the show notes.
okay.
Yeah. So, can you tell us like do you have any story about like when somebody had an epiphany, or like somebody that really couldn't figure out what they were or who they were, or
Um,
anything like that?
Not so much that, but I have definitely had clients cry with me.
Uh,
Um, and I think it's mostly women who, unfortunately, I think as women, we don't see ourselves the way we should see ourselves a lot of the time. And so when I can show somebody the way I see them,
yeah.
um, and to have them have that reaction, it's a pretty amazing feeling.
That gives me chill bumps, Marlena, because they see themselves through this fog
Mhm,
of their own self-perception,
mhm,
and then when they see what you see and what your camera brings out, it's kind of like, my nephew is a makeup artist, and a few years ago, um, this was back when he was working in a retail setting. This elderly man brought his wife in, and she had Parkinson's disease,
mhm.
and I go again, damn it. She had Parkinson's disease, and she couldn't do her own makeup anymore. And
Mhm.
her husband brought her there and got my nephew, and this is gonna make me cry, I'm gonna try not to, got my nephew to teach him how to do her makeup.
Aw.
And up until then, my nephew thought he saw makeup. And then when he saw that lady's reaction, and she just cried
Yeah.
when she saw herself with makeup on again, and guys probably like, whatever. But then the husband was crying
Mhm.
because,
Yeah.
sorry. And then Ryan was crying. So they just had a big old crying party. But I think that's a really good example for all of us, that what we deliver, what we're actually doing for people, isn't necessarily what we're
Right.
physically doing,
Right.
because what you do could literally be changing somebody's life.
Yeah. And I'm a big, big believer in leaving people better than you found them.
Yeah. So, what do you want to let? I got to quit crying. All right, so let's get back on entrepreneurs and some advice for them or anything else that you want to talk about. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. By
Um, and the other thing too is I would say if you're at a point right now where all you can really do is, do your own images or have somebody use your phone and do your images, watch your lighting first and your background second.
Okay.
Um, always go with your lighting first.
Mhm. All right. So with stuff like that, what kind of lighting do you recommend? Like obviously just for an iPhone, you can have like a little halo light and
Mhm.
just have it on your phone. But do you have any other suggestions for somebody just starting out who
I'm
doesn't feel
I'm a
comfortable?
big, big fan of natural light.
Okay.
Um, and just keep in mind that the larger the light source, the softer the light. So let's say if you have a big
Oh.
window or something like that,
Mhm.
because it's all relative. The size is relative. So, for example, if I have a big window and I go all the way across the room, that
Mhm.
light source gets smaller. If I move toward it, it gets bigger and the light will get softer.
Mhm.
Um, not if you're standing in the direct sun, but
Okay, so if I'm across the room, the light is if I'm close to the window, the light is softer than if I'm far
yeah,
away.
if as long as it's not streaming through the window.
Yeah, okay.
Um, and play with it.
Mhm.
Um, but usually for women, the most flattering light for us is usually front light
Mm, okay.
because once you start raking light across your face, you
Yeah.
get every little thing.
Yeah, you get the shadow of your
Yeah,
nose and
yeah.
and
Um,
all that stuff.
where for men, they can handle a lot more side light
That is
because
so freaking
I
unfair.
know it is.
Like every dang thing else.
Um, but even for men also too with muscle cuts and things like that, um, you want to kind of enhance all that, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But just even if you're outside, because even if you're outside on a cloudy day, you
Uh-huh.
always have a direction of light because the sun is up there somewhere.
Yeah. So if somebody is outside with a direction of light, they should try to look towards the sun.
Well, watch under your eyes and the
Okay.
the shadows under your eyes.
Mhm.
So if it's cloudy out, just keep turning and you'll see.
Yeah. I have a big problem with that and have since I was a child because my skin is really fair.
Mhm.
So therefore my skin is thin. So it'll look dark under my eyes because you can, see the blood, whatever, the blood and then the shadows from the bone structure and stuff. And sometimes
Okay.
it's like, yeah, I need to do that because sometimes it's like, good Lord, I look like a cadaver.
Yeah, try turning it and chin up a little bit
Okay. All
toward the
right.
light. A little bit.
Okay. So turn and look up at the light.
Yeah.
What do you think of iPhone's, portrait mode?
I only because believe it or not, I don't take a whole lot of,
Yeah.
my own stuff that
Uh-huh.
way, but I've used it for virtual
Oh,
photography.
yeah?
Mhm. Yeah, because the app actually allows me to take over your phone on
Mhm.
your camera on your phone. And
Yeah.
so I can, especially if you have an iPhone, I can switch it to portrait mode, I can switch it to wide angle, I can switch it and I do that a lot.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing about portrait mode is if you take it with it, then even after you've taken it, you can switch between the portrait modes.
Mhm.
So if you pick the wrong one, the first time I ever used it, I didn't really know. I mean, this is a few years ago when it first came out. I didn't really know. I was just messing around. I took a picture with it. Okay, there we go again. These people were like, "Oh my god, that's such a good picture." So I posted the I removed portrait mode from the photograph and then posted it with it, added it to the post. I'm like, "This is the one and this is portrait mode." And I was like, "Okay, so now Apple needs to figure out a way that we can just all walk around with portrait mode on virtually all around us. So no matter who's looking at us, we look like we're in portrait mode." But it is amazing how much difference it can make.
Yeah. Well,
So I was curious.
that's the whole thing. Apps and it that's the other thing too. I believe in retouching.
Mhm.
I don't believe in over retouching.
Yeah. Because you want them to be themselves.
Right.
You don't want them to look like you have turned them into somebody totally different. People around my age, people around in the 80s will remember Paula Abdul's video. Remember when they stretched it?
Mhm.
MTV, whatever. Not MTV, but the people that produced the video, and they stretched the whole video to make her look thinner. And that became like the whole focus and the joke about it. And the whole song kind of people weren't paying attention to because they were so focused on that isn't what she looks like.
Well, I remember, in college learning about, in the early days of cinema and
Uh-huh.
TV and things like that, they used to veil the camera. And whether it be with an actual veil of some sort that they put in
Uh-huh.
front of the lens or, sometimes I guess they could do it with maybe a little Vaseline or something, but that sometimes that can skew it. But there were certain actresses and whatnot that would not get in front of a camera that wasn't veiled because it softened
Oh
the
yeah.
wrinkles in their skin.
Huh.
Um, so, I mean, it's been around for a long time. Let's
Yeah.
face it, we wanna all look our best.
That's right, we do. We wanna look our best, but we need to look like ourselves
Right.
because if you don't look like yourself, then you're out somewhere and nobody's gonna know who you are.
Yeah.
Or you show
And,
up to work with them and they'll be like, "That's not you. You're not
and time marches on and eventually it marches across your face.
That's true. And I always say, hey, well, and I'm sure a lot of people say this, every year is a blessing. And I tell people when they start fussing about their age, I'm like, okay, you pick which years of your life you're willing to give up.
Yeah.
And think about it. Every year of your life adds to the tapestry of you. And so you pick if you want to be 5 years younger, ever have me pick which 5 years or which months that add up to 5 years. You pick the ones you're willing to give up and then think of all the things that you would miss. So
Mm,
we need to start. I mean, it's easy to get in that loop of I'm old, I have wrinkles, but we really need to start appreciating our age and experience,
right.
especially now when people feel so insecure because they're working with so many younger people who know a lot about technology. And I'm
Right.
like, okay, yes, they know about technology and social media and stuff because that's what they grew up knowing, but they don't know all the other stuff that you know because you've been out in the real world for 30
Right.
years doing it.
And also too, like laugh lines.
Yeah.
Would you give up any of those things that
Yeah.
cause those laugh lines?
Yeah.
So, it's just it makes us who we are.
That's right. That's right. And we need to be proud of it.
Mhm.
All right. So give everybody information about how they can, or unless you have something else that you want to share, I want you to tell everybody how they
Your
can
show.
find out how they can find out more about you, how they can get information about the photographer in your pocket and this new service that you have, any of that stuff, and how they can connect with you on social media.
The best thing to do, everything is linked to my website. So marlanasemenza.com. Scroll down to the bottom. There is a link to any social media that you would want on there.
Yeah,
And photographer in your pocket is on there under virtual photography. Everything's on there. Everything's on there. So it's a
oh, and your podcast.
Mhm.
Your
It's on there
Iconic
too.
Image. It's a great podcast, y'all, so that's linked on there
It
as
is.
well. She has some really amazing guests and some great conversations, so I highly encourage you to go, listen to her podcast. You can get the links on her site, but also every platform, wherever you listen to podcasts, you
Yeah.
can catch it on there, so,
It's called Your Iconic Image.
yeah. Marlena, thank you so much for joining me. Oh, yeah, Kelly says I've known Marlena for many, many years, both professionally and personally. She can make anyone look great. And yes, I've seen so much of your work and I need to work with you and do it. And I know I've been saying that forever, but one of these days I need to get off of it and actually do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's the thing. I'll say to people, "Oh, I really want to photograph you. I really want to photograph you." And I remember, I think it was Annie Leibovitz saying, "When I say that, it means I really want to know somebody," and it's
Yeah.
true. Like to me, that's how I kind of really get to know somebody.
Yeah, because it's the window into them.
Mhm.
And of course, that's after all the questionnaire and everything, but even without the questionnaire,
Yeah.
you get to see kind of their bare soul or whatever. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know how to say it,
Yeah.
but
And it's a trust fall, but I got you.
yeah. Yes, she's definitely got you. Well, y'all go check out Marlana at marlanasemenza.com, right?
Mhm.
And the podcast at Your Iconic Image. Marlena, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lisa. It's always a pleasure.
Yep. See you soon. Bye, everybody. See you next week.